CBS 46 News presents Public Affairs on Peach.
Good morning and welcome to Public Affairs on Peach. I'm Karen Greer. Well, this month, CBS 46 News is digging deep into juvenile justice thanks to unprecedented access to Douglas County courtrooms. We call it Teens, Trauma, and Trouble. CBS 46 investigative reporter Sally Sears focuses this time on juvenile justice reform, specifically how the system's working with the community to keep the kids out of jail.
Nobody likes locking up young people. It's expensive, and instead of stopping the bad behavior, too often it leads to more lockups. Here is why recent changes are beginning.
You can save every child. A system that gives up on the child, giving up on the future.
That's an admission and a challenge to why lockup doesn't work very well.
Kids that venture into our system, you know, society has that old saying of lock 'em up, lock 'em up, lock 'em up.
Instead, Georgia Governor Nathan Deal is changing the way the state treats young offenders. His goal? To reduce the number of repeat offenders and to bring down cost.
We had a budget of roughly $300 million. Of that $300 million, $200 million was devoted for out-of-home placements. Those placements were and are pretty expensive.
His department says Georgia taxpayers pay about $90,000 a year to lock up one child, and fully a quarter of them are low-risk offenders guilty of only petty crimes.
But it didn't matter. You were already handcuffing kids on campus and traumatizing them, putting them in the back of a patrol car. And, you know, they're not going to forget this, and it's going to impact their life all the way into adulthood.
Instead, Juvenile Justice Department leaders call for a therapeutic new model. It includes counseling for parents, playtime therapy to combat trauma, and mentoring programs.
It makes no sense for us, not just us as a department, but us as a state, to provide resources to youth that are low risk. Yeah. If they're not going to reoffend, why should we spend $90,000 a year on them?
Some of these new therapy or community-based diversion programs can cost as little as $3,000 to $5,000 per child for 2 to 3 months.
You cannot get in any more trouble at school. Do you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Supporters say the idea is not nearly so traumatic as putting a child behind bars.
You're going to leave me at a point where I'm going to have to make a decision whether or not to lock you up or not, and I don't want to lock you up.
When it works, juvenile justice leaders say it's better for young people and for their families.
You know what? You can't deal with the underlying issues that causes disruptive and delinquent behavior in a prison. You can't. You got to have the family involved.
This is an idea with a lot of money behind it. Millions of public dollars are available for juvenile incentive grants.
Teach them now while they're young.
And for evidence-based programming for rural Georgians.
Thanks, Sally, for that. Now, you might recognize our guest from the story you just saw. Judge Michelle Harrison serves in Douglas County Juvenile Court. So happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
You were amazing in that courtroom. I was with you for a couple of days. When we first approached you and said, you and Judge Walker, and said we wanted to bring our cameras in, what were you thinking about?
I think at the time we were thinking this is our opportunity to really give the community and the public an opportunity to see what really goes on in our courtrooms. I think a lot of people think that, you know, juvenile court, because part of it is confidential, that we don't do enough to stop the crime, especially for our youth. And that's just not the case. And I think society does not understand the importance of understanding that children's brains are very different than adults, and we have to treat them differently. And this is the opportunity we have, without violating anyone's rights to confidentiality, to let the society see that it's not all about just locking kids up.
Now, we've been into a couple so far, about 4. Do you feel like that message is getting out?
I hope that it is. It seems like it is. I think that generally education in its entirety is getting out to the community that, yes, kids can do a lot of bad things, and sometimes a lot worse than other times. And we have to understand not just their mental dynamics, but the family dynamic as well. And usually it's the family that has shaped or failed to shape the child in a positive direction, and we have to fix the families from the core of the family unit.
I got to tell you, Judge Harrison, I was just hurt in a lot of those stories that I did witness. A lot of those families, the fights, the struggles that are going on, families that the parents, both of them incarcerated in some cases, or some of the violence that goes on in those homes. It's got to be tough for you as a judge to deal with that day after day after day as well.
I think that most of the cases that we deal with come from that sort of background, and it's not uncommon for us to see, you know, not only the child acting out, but the parents as well. Children experiencing and observing and being subject to domestic violence is very common in our courtroom, no matter what setting that it's in. And so it's almost the norm for us. It is extremely rare that I see a child come in where I think he or she has wonderful family support, extended family support, friends that are positive influences, and you know that this is a one-time mistake that this child has made, and that they will ultimately be successful. Those are the rarities.
Judge Harrison, we're going to take a break right now, and when we come back, Public Affairs on Peach will return. We're going to continue our conversation with Judge Michelle Harrison, so stay with us.